Thank you for staying with us. In January 2018, the African Union agreed to establish the African Continental Free Trade Area and simultaneously a protocol supporting the free movement of persons between the countries of Africa. As of January 2021, 54 countries had signed the convention and 35 countries had fully ratified, whereas 33 countries had signed the Free Movement of Persons Protocol and only 4 countries had fully ratified. This number is a far cry from the desired target and raises numerous questions on the delays. Professor Alan Hirsch is director of the Nelson Mandela School of Public Governance, University of Cape Town, and earlier he walked me through the various challenges around the free movement of persons on the continent.
Normally the delay isn't this long. The African Free Trade, Continental Free Trade Agreement, which was signed and agreed to by leaders at the same summit of the African Union at the beginning of 2018, that has been ratified, fully ratified. In fact, by now, I don't know, close to 50 countries have signed it and more than 40 countries have ratified it. So it is kind of in force, although it isn't really in force in the sense that there was a number of sub-agreements that had to be finalized before it actually came into force. So the fact that no more than 4 countries, and they're 4 smallish countries, they include Sao Tome, Niger, and a couple of other, I think Rwanda. They're quite small African countries, but by African standards.
The process of agreement happened in 2018. The ratification hasn't happened. Why the hesitancy, or what is a hold-up in your view, is the first question. And the second would be, what is the benefit that accrues to these 4 countries that have already gone ahead and ratified it?
They have no immediate benefits. They only have benefit once 15 countries have ratified it. So when 15 countries have ratified it, then those countries which have ratified it, it comes into force for them. And what it basically means is no more than visa-free access. So you don't have to apply for a visa if you want to travel from Sao Tome to Niger in this case, although that may already be the case. The reason why other countries haven't ratified, I think that, well, unlike the Free Trade Agreement, which I mentioned earlier, when the 15 countries have ratified this protocol, the Free Movement of Persons Protocol, it comes into force for those 15 countries. So it means that they have to accept visitors. This is visitors for up to 3 months without visas at any time. Now, that doesn't seem like such a terrible thing, actually, but I think that there's a roadmap attached to the protocol which suggested quite rapid movement down the next 2 phases, although that would be subject to the approval of the Executive Council of the AU. And I think that some of the richer countries in Africa, particularly some of the larger and better off countries in Africa, were afraid that even though they're not allowed to stay more than 3 months, this would encourage a relatively uncontrolled movement of people from countries which may be poorer and people looking for work.
Well, I suppose you do raise an interesting point. If we take the South Africa-Zimbabwe relationship, for instance, for the last few years, visas were done away with, and you pretty much just walk into South Africa, if you will, with your passport, or the other way around, and you have up to a 90-day stay. Now, over and above that, what's gone and happened is the 2 leaders of Botswana and Namibia, only recently, I think in the last 14 days, have agreed that they're completely doing away with passports, and the expectation that in the next few months, I'd imagine, that the nationals of either country can just take basically their national identification card and walk across into either Botswana or Namibia or vice versa. Now, what in your mind would have encouraged them to go ahead and do that? And obviously, is this process, I suppose, confirms that it's prejudicial to those countries that are doing economically well and whose neighbors aren't doing so well?
Let's start with the Zimbabwe-South Africa thing. Obviously, well, this started in 2009 when Zimbabwe was going through a political and economic crisis. And South Africa made special provision for Zimbabweans not only to visit for 3 months, but actually to stay for extended periods on special permits. And those special permits have been renewed until now, until the middle of next year. In the view of the South African government, the situation is normalized in Zimbabwe, and Zimbabweans should now go through the same procedures if they want to stay longer than their visiting period. And that means that they can apply for settlement or various kinds of status. But in the Namibia-Botswana case, that's really interesting, and it's not the first time it's happened in Africa. It's essentially for people who live on the borders. So in many African countries, you'll know the border, and all the listeners will know, viewers, that the border between Botswana and Namibia is a straight line that was drawn by colonial powers. It cut across pre-existing communities. The purpose of this agreement is that the people living on the border who have friends and relatives on either side and that maybe have business interests on either side can cross without passports. They just have to have their ID documents. And I guess Namibia and Botswana both recognize each other's ID systems as being decent systems that they can rely on if they need to rely on it. This is true in quite a number of African countries. Similar arrangements are available in other African countries. I just wanted to say one final thing, though, and that is that within the Southern African Development Community, we already have visa-free travel. I used to travel to Zambia 4 or 5 times a year for work that I was doing there. I didn't have to worry about a visa. After a while, I didn't even have to worry about a yellow fever certificate, which I had to initially. So between most Southern African countries, visa-free travel already exists. And that's true in a number of regional communities. The challenge is to take it beyond those regional communities and the neighbors, like Botswana and Namibia.
So what is that actual challenge? What is a hold-up? Is it a fear about losing track of immigrants that come into your country, and how you are then able to manage that process? Is it an economic issue?
Well, it is. It's both of those. The losing track could be an economic issue. It could be a security issue. If there's some sort of security fear or terrorism fear or something like that, then losing track could be an issue. It certainly could be an economic issue. And it's true that South Africa, for example, now has a relatively large number of people living in South Africa who were not born in South Africa, who were born in other parts of Africa and are working in South Africa, often for economic reasons, but not only for economic reasons. I think the reason why the Continental project is difficult is because, unlike Namibia and Botswana, or South Africa and Zimbabwe, we don't have such close relationships with countries in other parts of Africa. We don't really know how the systems in, say, the Central African Republic work. Are they reliable? If they are part of the agreement, can we rely on them to tell us if one of their citizens visiting our country has a criminal record or is under suspicion of terrorism or anything like that? So I think the further you are away from each other, in most cases, the longer it takes to develop the kind of trust that you need to develop in order to be able to accept this kind of agreement. So I think that the movement towards the free movement protocol implementation involves a steady building of trust between African countries that are further away from each other.
Well, you've talked about SADC and obviously an understanding of the various member states within that SADC community. But let's talk about other regional blocs and their power or capacity to push towards ratification and obviously signature. Is it about the individual countries' desires, or is it about the various blocs, ECOWAS, for instance, and their ability to then encourage their member states to go ahead and ratify?
So let's take ECOWAS to start with. ECOWAS was the very first region, and this is a large group of West African states, French-speaking and English-speaking, amongst their languages, but Francophone, Anglophone. And they, in 1979, actually made the first step towards the free movement of persons. They had a protocol within ECOWAS, which was implemented shortly after that. So within ECOWAS, you are officially allowed to travel without a visa to a neighboring country. It doesn't mean you can necessarily work there, although in many cases it's not that difficult for West Africans to work in other West African countries. They also now have a West African passport, a common passport, but that hasn't been widely taken up. In East Africa, they have similar arrangements. They came into it a little bit later, but they've been moving very quickly in East Africa. So in East Africa, there's an East African e-passport, which is accepted around the world, and certainly within East Africa and the rest of Africa. And if among certain of the East African countries, there are arrangements that you can travel without passports as well. So between Uganda, Rwanda, and Kenya, you don't need a passport to cross a border. The other East African countries haven't come into that part of the agreement yet. But, I think it's a matter of time. And I think that's probably how the process will proceed. In Southern Africa now, Botswana and Namibia are setting the pace. In East Africa, it was Rwanda, Kenya, and Uganda. And I think that's how the process is going to unfold. And then when Southern Africa and East Africa get to the point where there's a high level of trust internally, they can perhaps establish a relationship between the two communities. The East African community has a high reputation in terms of documentation and systems, and there's no reason why SADC couldn't move towards a relationship with the East African community relatively quickly.